Is it still worth buying a Canon C200? Hello, my name is Jonathan Palfrey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe as always, as it massively helps me out. Now today I want to do a quick video talking about our Canon C200. You've seen on this channel I've done a lot of videos talking about the Blackmagic cameras and also the Sony cameras. So you might not realise actually for the last couple of years our main camera system we have been using has been the Canon C200, and it actually replaced our Sony FX7, so we've definitely jumped back and forth between different brands over the years. But now today we've decided to sell it, and it's going off so that we can purchase another new camera. The question is, which one are we going for? So before I get on to why we have chosen to sell the camera, I'll give a little bit of background into why we chose to buy it in the first place. Now, looking back, we probably purchased it a little bit too late in its life cycle. We've had it for 2 years now and it had already been out for 2-3 years at that point. And we probably should have purchased one as soon as it came out. Because when it came out, it had some really incredible features that we weren't seeing elsewhere. You were seeing really good autofocus in video. You were seeing really great RAW capability, all in a package that's, fairly affordable. But there were certain flaws that, we were aware of, and coming from the FS7, we were losing things like 10-bit color recording and also some higher quality high frame rates. Now, for the reasons why we went for this camera, well, first off was the autofocus. That was kind of the key #1 reason why we wanted to go with it. We do a lot of corporate work, and this is going to be kind of our corporate workhorse as a camera, and just taking away one of those elements that, if you make a mistake, if you screw up the focus, it ruins the entire video shooting. Especially when you're doing a lot of interviews, autofocus does actually make a lot of sense. And in the Canon autofocus, the way it works, the way it's kind of quite natural in sort of its focus racking, works really nicely for doing interviews. The other big reason was the colours. Canon colours, certainly at the time, were far better than what Sony were producing. The colours out of this camera are far, far better than what the FS7 and certainly what the FX5 could produce. That meant we weren't really that worried about the sort of 8-bit limitation of this camera in MP4 mode. When shooting in that mode for the majority of our shoots, because we didn't want to shoot in the huge file sizes that RAW would create, it was good enough. For a lot of situations where you had controlled situations, doing an interview, something like this, then 8-bit is absolutely fine. And especially with those great colours that the Canon could produce, you didn't really feel that you needed 10-bit too often. Now, of course, RAW is a really big, amazing feature on this camera, but unfortunately, because of those file sizes, we just never really used it. It is an absolutely amazing quality RAW, and I've seen people use it all the time on films, online, and it certainly does max out the quality of the camera and something that was really lacking when shooting an 8-bit. But unfortunately, because of those file sizes and there being such a gap between 8-bit and RAW, and because of the expensive CFast cards, it just never felt like a format that we really wanted to shoot. Now, when Blackmagic came along with Blackmagic RAW, they solved all the problems with all the different compression ratios and much better file sizes, and not to mention a much smoother computer experience. And because of that, they became kind of more popular cameras to use than the C200. So although the camera had very good dynamic range when shooting in RAW, in 8-bit it was quite limited, and I found that quite frustrating in quite a few scenarios. There's quite a few moments where backgrounds are overexposed, and I just felt like you were losing too much image. I also found that the image could be quite noisy, and it's something you had to be quite careful when shooting. This was the case whether shooting MP4 or in RAW. And unfortunately, that kind of just made it a little bit more frustrating, especially when you're passing on to someone else to shoot and you had to explain about how you needed to expose the camera correctly. And there wasn't really much room for, adjusting later in post. You had to really quite nail it. Otherwise, you may be clipping the highlights because of the dynamic range, or if you go too dark, of course, you're going to get those really noisy shadows. Finally, the 120p really wasn't that good at all. Compared to what the FS7 could produce, it was quite a downgrade and a real shame, really. Now, we got rid of the FS7 basically because we owned it for years and it was falling apart. We were very tempted and very close to purchasing just another one. We were in that weird transition period where there weren't really any new cameras coming out. So we decided at that moment to go down the C200 route, but maybe looking back, if we had known what was coming, we certainly would have waited for the cameras like the FX6 and the C70. So that kind of brings us to today, us selling the Canon C200. And well, why are we selling it? Well, we held on to it because we thought it may be handy as a spare camera when we've got lots of shoots going on, because it still can produce an excellent image in certain scenarios. But when you look at the competition and you look at how cameras have upgraded in this latest generation, you look at the Canon C70, it's just such a better camera overall. And then you look at other cameras like the Sony FX3 that we have, which also produces really good colors now. It doesn't have any of the issues that they used to have in the past. They can shoot excellent slow motion and the dynamic range is better. You've got 10-bit in all of these cameras now. It really felt everything combined. There was just no need holding on to the Canon C200. Size and weight also made a big factor into that. There's no need for these larger cameras anymore. Yes, it's good to impress the client, I guess, but you can always build up a C70 to make it look a bit more impressive if you really want to. But it's so much more convenient being able to put your cameras into kind of normal photography bags. You know, being able to fit more other kit in the bag with you so you can bring extra lenses along rather than just having to use the entire bag for the body of the camera. What we're really seriously considering replacing it with actually is another Sony A74, which you might think that's a hell of a different camera to go for, but actually price-wise, a new A74 is about what we can get for this C200. So in terms of cost of the business, it's pretty much a like-for-like swap. And it just offers a lot more. I mean, you obviously have things like photography ability in there. It has a much sharper image, which is great. You've got much improved colors of the Sony, so there's not really that concern anymore about the issues of shooting Sony for color reasons. And you've now also got that 10-bit image built into the camera. Not to mention much better autofocus, it's improved so much more, and a full frame sensor. There's so much going for the latest generation cameras, even if they are only around £2,000, it's so impressive. I think even on a professional environment, I prefer to shoot with a Sony A74 over the Canon C200. Now, of course, in terms of the replacement, I am going to miss a few features of the C200. I'm going to miss the built-in ND filters, although we do have that on our C70. And I'm certainly going to miss some of the ergonomics of having larger cameras, although I think they can be balanced out with some of the advantages of smaller cameras too. You know, despite this camera being a bit larger, it still could suffer from micro jitters at certain focal lengths, so IBIS is actually still a really, I think, important feature in a modern camera, even up to this size. I am going to miss the larger screen. That is something the A74 is really poor for. There are some really great screens you can purchase that are viewable in daylight, which this screen never was. So even though it was quite large, in bright daylight it still wasn't really good enough. So you still would have to use an external screen anyway. So I don't think there's much of a loss there either. Battery life was okay with the C200, but I'm finding with cameras like the FX3 and the C70 that they are just as good, if not far better, than what the C200 could do. And also other little things, like the fan on the C200 was very, very noisy. It did cut off when you were actually shooting, but in between takes and just sort of sat there whirling away, it was quite distracting and frustrating to have that kind of in the background. So is a C200 still a good purchase? For some people, maybe. If you want to just shoot exclusively RAW and you want autofocus, then this is a pretty good buy currently. There's not really many other options out there in the second-hand market. I certainly wouldn't pick one of these up brand new. I don't know even if you can still actually saying that, but second-hand, maybe if you can find a good price, grabbing a C200 might be a decent option. That said, I think for your money, and certainly if you're starting out, there are much better options out there now. I think investing slightly more in cameras like the C70 or the FX3 are well worth it. Or if you don't have that sort of budget, then I think the A74 is a brilliant value for money hybrid camera, which will cover you for nearly any situation that you will be doing. I'd love to know what you think. Please leave a comment down below. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe as it massively helps me out, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.